The holidays had always wrapped themselves around my heart like a warm quilt. Family, laughter, the scent of cinnamon and pine. At least, that's what I used to believe. But one single, cutting comment from my daughter-in-law cracked that illusion wide open. Even now, as I sit here staring out over the water, I can still feel the sting. It wasn't just about Christmas. It was about where I stood in their lives, and the gut-wrenching realization that maybe I didn't belong at all. But what happens when you're pushed too far? When your heart breaks in just the right way to let in something new, something stronger? Oh, this story? You won't forget it. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because this is just the beginning. Christmas, that time of year when families gather close, cherishing one another. Or so I thought. It was my son, Tyler, who first suggested I join them for the holidays. His wife, Madison, came from an affluent family, the kind who think monogrammed napkins make or break a dinner party. But I never imagined that would be a problem. I'm a simple woman, Eleanor Shaw, 74 years old, retired school librarian, living quietly in a weathered cottage perched above Windermere Bay, surrounded by sea air, my 2 old cats, and the ghost of my late husband's laughter. That had always been enough for me. Peace, simplicity, a life gently cradled by waves and memory. I thought I knew where I fit in the world. Oh, how wrong I was. That year, Tyler told me they'd be spending Christmas at Madison's family's estate in Aspen Ridge, a sprawling, sterile sort of place with more glass than soul. When they invited me, I assumed it was a polite gesture, nothing more. But then Madison, with that cool, polished smile of hers, tilted her head and said the words that still echo in my mind. "You just don't really fit in with my family, Eleanor. You're too old, too plain. It's not the right setting for you." Her voice was sweetened with venom. I stared at her, this woman who had married my only child. I had tried so hard to welcome her. I had overlooked the snide remarks, the fake politeness, the way she always seemed to look through me instead of at me. I felt my throat tighten as her words hung in the air like frostbite, and Tyler, my sweet boy, just stood there, silent, eyes down. It was like watching someone lock a door in front of you from the other side. He'd made his choice. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said softly. "Madison thinks it's best if you don't come." And just like that, I was no longer part of their Christmas, just out. I didn't cry that night. I fed the cats, tidied up the kitchen, folded laundry I'd already folded once. I told myself I was fine. I could have a peaceful holiday alone. But something inside me cracked, something deep. The house felt colder, heavier, as if my very presence no longer filled its corners. I tried to keep busy, but without the sound of my son's voice, without even the anticipation of company, everything felt hollow. Then the phone rang. It was Helen Graves, one of my dearest friends since my days teaching in Portland. "Eleanor," she said, her voice like a warm hug, "don't you dare spend Christmas alone. We're coming over. We're bringing dinner, wine, and the best cheesecake this side of the Pacific. We're bringing Christmas to you." And true to her word, Helen showed up with Ruth Miles and 2 other women I had grown old beside. We had laughed through our 40s, cried through our 50s, and clung to each other through widowhood. That night, they filled my quiet home with stories and cinnamon and comfort. It wasn't the family I expected, but maybe it was the one I needed. As we sat around the table, I found myself reminiscing about the house my husband and I had worked our entire lives to buy. Cliffside Cottage wasn't just wood and stone. It was dreams made real. I had always planned to leave it to Tyler. He was my legacy, my only child. But as I looked around at the women who had shown up for me, without obligation, without blood, I felt something shift. Maybe Tyler didn't deserve it. Maybe Madison never did. I had poured my life into that house, into that dream, and now they had taken more than my seat at a holiday table. They had taken my place in their lives, my dignity. Ruth leaned in, her eyes fierce but kind. Eleanor, you've earned that home. You don't owe them a damn thing, especially not after what they've done. Her words hit me like thunder. She was right. Oh my God, how had I not seen it sooner? I thought leaving Tyler the house would show him how much I loved him. But love is supposed to go both ways, isn't it? And the way he had stood there, silent, compliant, I realized something painful. He didn't love me the way that mattered, not anymore. A fire lit in my chest, not rage, but resolve. That night, after everyone had left, I went into the study, opened the old filing cabinet, and pulled out the will I had signed years ago. Tyler was the sole beneficiary. At the time, it had seemed like the right thing. But now, the thought of him inheriting Cliffside Cottage made my stomach twist. This home was mine. The life I had built in it was mine. I wasn't going to let him or Madison take that away from me. I lit a candle, sat at my desk, and stared at the page. The ink was still crisp, but my decision was clear. I was about to take the first step in reclaiming everything they thought they could erase. And just like that, the seed of something fierce took root in me. Not bitterness, not quite, but something sharp, something unyielding. Not revenge for the sake of pain, but for clarity, for reckoning. They would come to understand the price of pushing me aside. No longer would Eleanor Shaw be the soft-spoken woman overlooked at the dinner table. That holiday may have ended, but something far greater had begun. Even now, thinking back to that bitter Christmas night, I can't help but ask myself, how did I let it go on for so long? How had I become a ghost in my own family's life, a shadow behind their polished glass walls? Maybe I believed blood would always matter. Maybe I believed my love would be enough. But clearly, it wasn't. Not to Madison. And heartbreakingly, not to Tyler either. As I prepared to change the will, the very document that held the legacy of everything my husband and I had built, I realized it wasn't just the house I was protecting anymore. It was my dignity, my voice, my name. And deep inside, I wondered, what would come next? Would Tyler fight me? Would Madison dig in her manicured heels? Or would I finally show them what happens when you shove a mother too far? I actually hoped they would push back. I was ready. The night after Christmas felt colder than the one before, and not because of the temperature outside. I curled up in the armchair near the fireplace, the flames flickering and cracking, trying their best to warm the house. But no fire could melt the ice that had formed around my heart. I stared into those flames for a long time, my mind circling back to Madison's words. That smug, effortless cruelty, you just don't fit in. And Tyler, oh, Tyler. When he repeated her dismissal without hesitation, it crushed me in a way I can't even put into words. He hadn't fought for me. He hadn't even hesitated. I'd always known she didn't care for me, but I never imagined she'd have the audacity to tell me I didn't belong, not just in her family, but in my son's life. And what was worse, he agreed. Silently, yes, but just as clearly. All my life, I'd taken pride in being self-sufficient. The Cliffside Cottage wasn't just a house. It was a dream that my husband, Martin, and I carved out of nothing. It was where we'd planned to grow old together, where we raised Tyler, where I held Martin's hand until the end. It was more than real estate. It was our sanctuary, my heart, my history. Now it felt like that too was being stolen from me, turned into a prize for people who hadn't earned it. Even though I had friends who loved me, friends like Helen and Ruth who would drop everything to bring joy back into my life, it wasn't the same. The betrayal from your own child, that's a different kind of pain. No holiday dinner or cheerful visit could erase that wound. As the hours crept by, I wandered aimlessly through the house. My feet led me to the old upright piano in the corner. It was dusty, forgotten. Martin had adored that piano. He used to sit there every evening, playing soft lullabies and silly jazz tunes, laughing when I'd twirl around the kitchen. That music had filled every corner of this home once. But now, silence. The kind that presses down on you until it squeezes the breath from your lungs. I stood there staring at it, and I knew I couldn't just let this happen. I had built this life. I had sacrificed, fought, and bled to preserve it. And now, at 74, I was supposed to hand it all over to someone who had tossed me aside like I was yesterday's obligation? Oh no, not a chance. The thought of Madison and Tyler owning this house, living here, sipping cocktails on my porch, brushing past the piano like it meant nothing, it made my skin crawl. Her words kept ringing. You don't fit in. Oh my God, who did she think she was? No, this was no longer about a holiday snub. It was about my place in this world. I had spent decades shaping this space, pouring myself into every beam and bookshelf. And now, someone else thought they could rewrite the story of my life while I watched from the sidelines? I walked to the window and stared out over the sea. The waves crashed against the rocks like they were angry too. The ocean had always been my solace, my compass. And that night, it whispered back something fierce and bold. Take it back, Eleanor. I wiped my hands across my sweater, turned from the window, and made my way to the desk. My fingers trembled as I opened the drawer and pulled out the copy of the will. My name, Tyler's name. It was all still there, untouched. But not for long. The decision had been made. Cliffside Cottage would no longer be Tyler's inheritance. It would be my legacy until I said otherwise. I was done giving without receiving. I was done assuming love meant loyalty. The pen in my hand felt heavier than ever, but with it, I would redraw the lines of my life. This next chapter, it would be mine. I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who wrote her child out of a will. I mean, what kind of mother does that? But this wasn't about Tyler anymore. This was about me, about everything I had poured into this life, and the dignity I had let slip through my fingers for far too long. The pen scratched across the paper like a blade, slow and deliberate. My signature sealed the change. Tyler was no longer the sole heir. The house, Cliffside Cottage, would not pass into ungrateful hands. I stared down at the document, letting the weight of it settle into my chest. Was I doing the right thing? For one raw second, doubt crept in. But then Madison's voice slithered through my mind. You don't fit in. And Tyler's silence, his refusal to look me in the eyes. That was all the justification I needed. I folded the paper carefully and tucked it back into the drawer. My heart thudded, wild and alive, but oddly calm. I had made my choice. It wasn't just about the house. This was my line in the sand. The days that followed were still and quiet, like the hush before a storm. Tyler and Madison hadn't reached out. Not a call, not a message. I didn't expect them to. I wasn't sure how or when they'd find out about the change in the will, but I knew they would. And when they did, nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't know exactly what would come of it. Maybe they'd lash out. Maybe they'd disappear completely. But I was ready. I didn't feel like the woman they had dismissed anymore. No, Eleanor Shaw wasn't going to live quietly in the shadows anymore. I had come out of the dark, and they would feel it. Still, the nights felt heavier now, the silence more noticeable. Even though I had made my stand, even though the will had been changed, there was still a weight that hadn't lifted, like the house itself was holding its breath. Yet under all that stillness was a spark, a new feeling, empowerment. It had been so long since I'd felt like I had a voice, since I had claimed something entirely for myself. It was only the beginning, and I'd make sure they knew it. But I hadn't expected it to feel so final. At first, there was peace. I thought I could settle into it. I'd taken back control. That should have brought relief. And for a moment, it did. Until the phone rang. It was early, weeks after Christmas. I glanced at the screen. Douglas Reed, my lawyer. My pulse jumped. Something in my gut told me this wasn't going to be a routine check-in. "Eleanor," he said, voice calm but tight. "We need to talk. It's about your will." My chest clenched. I tried to stay composed. "What about it?" There was a long, uncomfortable pause on the other end. "I think we need to review the document again. Something's changed. I didn't catch it at first, but there's a clause that wasn't in the original draft. It concerns the estate, the house at Windmere." My stomach turned. "What are you talking about, Douglas?" My voice was sharper than I intended. He hesitated. "I think you'd better come in and sign some updated forms. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I don't know how it slipped past me." Oh no, I knew. Tyler. Somehow he had gotten to Douglas, manipulated him, convinced him, maybe, or used Madison's charm, or worse, her money. Whatever the method, it had worked. And now the will, the thing I thought was safe, had been tampered with. The drive to Douglas's office was agony. My fingers clenched the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Thoughts raced and collided, panic and fury dancing in my chest. What had they done? What had he done? I had trusted Douglas for years. He'd been the one to walk Martin and me through everything when we first bought the house. He'd been kind, steady, professional. But now, even he had fallen under their influence? When I walked in, Douglas greeted me with a strange smile. Not warm, not confident. No, it was the look of a man caught in the storm of his own making. He led me into his office, closing the door behind us. The air was heavy. "Eleanor," he began, voice low, almost sheepish, "I need to explain. Your son, Tyler, he's been coming in, repeatedly. He said you weren't feeling like yourself lately, that you asked him to help manage your affairs. I didn't question it at first. I started making the changes he requested." I blinked. "You've been changing my will without my knowledge?" My words came out tight, controlled, but inside I was burning. He dropped his gaze. "I'm so sorry. I should have called you sooner. I should have verified everything. But he was so certain. He said it was what you wanted, that this was your long-standing intention." I sat in silence, the betrayal crawling over my skin like frostbite. Tyler hadn't even come to me. He hadn't had the decency to talk to his mother. He had gone behind my back, treating my life like a business transaction. And Douglas? He had let him? My voice trembled, but I kept my chin high. "You let him rewrite my legacy, behind closed doors, without even speaking to me." Douglas finally looked up, and in his eyes, I saw something close to shame. I didn't think he would lie. I thought he was helping. I stood up slowly, my chair groaning beneath me. My heart was thundering. "You thought wrong." "How much?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, but sharp with fury. "How much did he pay you to betray me?" Douglas's face turned pale. "No, Eleanor," he stammered, hands trembling as he fumbled with his pen. "He didn't pay me. He kept insisting he was helping. Said you were starting to forget things, that you wanted to simplify everything." He paused, eyes wide with guilt. I didn't want to question it. I should have. God, I should have, but I didn't. I stared at him, disgust rising in my throat. This was the man I had trusted to protect my future. He couldn't even meet my gaze now. "You were supposed to be my lawyer," I said slowly, "not my son's errand boy." I stood abruptly, the chair groaning as it scraped the hardwood behind me. "This is over, Douglas. I don't trust you anymore." He jumped to his feet, hands raised as if trying to catch the air between us. "Please, Eleanor, let me fix this. Let me make it right." But I was already moving toward the door, the weight of betrayal crashing over me like a rogue wave. I had to get out of that office, out of that suffocating lie. The hallway blurred as I stormed through it, and by the time I reached my car, my hands were trembling too hard to get the key into the ignition on the first try. My son, my own son, the boy I had raised with lullabies and scraped knees and birthday cakes, was dismantling my life, piece by piece, like a game of chess. He had manipulated my lawyer, had rewritten my intentions like he was correcting a typo. He was erasing me. I drove with no destination, letting the road stretch before me like an unanswered question. My thoughts were a frenzy, rage, heartbreak, disbelief, all tangled together like seaweed dragging me beneath the waves. What had Tyler and Madison done? How far were they willing to go? They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't fight. Oh, they had underestimated me. As I drove along the winding cliffs of Windermere Bay, the ocean came back into view. That same endless, pulsing force that had always been my anchor. I stared at the waves, fierce and unrelenting, and I remembered, this house was mine. It had always been mine, not just in deed or memory, but in soul. No one, not my son, not his wife, and not some spineless lawyer, was going to take that from me. When I finally pulled into the gravel drive of Cliffside Cottage, the weight of the day sank into my bones. The betrayal was still raw, but the decision had never been more clear. I couldn't trust Douglas, and now I couldn't trust Tyler either, but I could still fight. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table for hours, sipping tea gone cold, staring at the shadows dancing across the wood floor. There was a fire inside me that I hadn't felt in years. Not rage, but purpose. The will could be rewritten again, this time properly, this time with someone who wasn't in my son's pocket. Tyler and Madison had no idea who they were up against. They thought I was fragile, an aging woman with a cozy home and a soft heart. But they had pushed me too far. I wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever again. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet fury. I began making calls, asking questions, searching for a new lawyer. I wasn't about to let them walk away with everything my husband and I had built just because they wore polished smiles and carried a sense of entitlement like it was birthright. The more I thought about it, the more the betrayal burrowed deeper under my skin. How could Tyler do this? My own flesh and blood? He knew what this house meant to me. He knew every memory, every creak in the floorboards. And yet, he still tried to steal it like it was a stock portfolio. Cold, calculated. And then came the phone call. 3 days later, mid-morning. My heart thudded when I saw his name flash across the screen. Tyler Shaw. I hesitated, then I picked up. "Mom," he said, his voice gravelly with something that wasn't quite guilt, but wasn't confidence either. "We need to talk. I know things have been tense, but this isn't right." I didn't say anything. "You can't just take the house away from me and Madison. It's not fair." I felt my jaw clench. "You think you can just stroll back into my life and talk to me like nothing's happened? Like you didn't already try to steal from me?" My voice trembled, but it didn't break. I held steady. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Then came the voice he always used when he was trying to wear me down. Soft, calculated, manipulative. "It's just the house, Mom. It's not about money. It's about family. You've always said we take care of each other. This is a family home. I thought you'd want us to have it." I felt my blood pressure rising. The gall, the audacity. "You thought wrong," I snapped. "This house is mine, long before Madison entered your life, long before you started believing I didn't matter, and it's staying mine." His tone sharpened. "This isn't fair. You can't just rewrite everything because you're angry." And then He said it. You know this is what Dad would have wanted. Oh my God. I froze. My heart cracked open. How dare he? He was using Martin's memory, my Martin, as a weapon, as if I didn't know exactly what my husband would have wanted, as if I hadn't sat beside him for years, building this dream together, as if I hadn't stood alone at his grave, whispering promises to protect our legacy. And now, Tyler dared to use Martin's name to manipulate me? That was the moment I stopped seeing my son and started seeing my opponent. What cut deepest wasn't the manipulation. It wasn't even the lies. It was how easily Tyler had fallen in step with Madison, like I was just a minor obstacle, something to be handled, dismissed, pushed aside. They had made their plans, drawn their future around my home, my life, and I wasn't even part of the equation. You don't know what your father would have wanted, I said, my voice barely holding together. You think this is about money? It's not. This is about respect. And you've lost mine. Silence. Tyler had never been good with confrontation. Even as a child, he avoided it, hid behind excuses or tears. But now he was a man hardened by ambition, or perhaps poisoned by proximity to someone who treated love like leverage. When he finally spoke again, his words sliced through the quiet like ice. If you don't change your mind, he said flatly, I'll have to take action. I'll go to court. I'll make sure I get what's mine. That house, it should be ours, not just yours. My stomach twisted, but I didn't flinch. I had expected this. What I hadn't expected was how calmly the rage now burned in me. Well, I said, my voice cold, steel wrapped in sorrow, I'll see you in court, Tyler. Then I added the line that would seal it. And don't you dare call me again until you've decided whether you want a mother or a piece of property. I hung up before he could respond. The phone hit the cushion beside me with a soft thud. I stared at it for a long moment, tears welling in my eyes, not from heartbreak, but fury, and I didn't let them fall. No, not this time. I was done being the soft landing, done being the one who always forgave. Tyler had made his choice, and no, I had to make mine. That night, I pulled out every file I had: tax records, deeds, insurance policies, letters, photos. I made a meticulous list of every document I'd need to take to my new lawyer. Proof, not just of ownership, but of history. I wasn't going to let Tyler win. Not this time. Not ever again. The next morning, I walked into the small, sun-drenched office of Caleb Morton, a young attorney with a sharp suit and sharper eyes. He looked like he'd just stepped out of law school, but something in his energy told me he was exactly the kind of person who wouldn't flinch when things got messy. He listened intently as I laid it all out. Every detail, every betrayal, every insult and maneuver Madison and Tyler had made behind closed doors. As I spoke, I realized just how much I'd been holding in. All the anger, all the sadness, all the disbelief. It came out in a flood. And Caleb didn't interrupt. He just nodded slowly, taking it all in, eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said with quiet confidence, "You've got a solid case, Eleanor. If your son wants a legal fight, we'll give him one. But we're going to do this the right way." It was the first time in weeks I felt something close to safety, reassurance, relief. I had someone in my corner now. Still, as I stepped back out into the crisp morning air, I knew this wouldn't be easy. Tyler and Madison weren't going to surrender, not after tasting the power they believed they deserved. They would dig in, they would claw, but so would I. Later that evening, back at Cliffside Cottage, I curled up in the living room, fire crackling beside me. I should have felt exhausted, but instead, a strange calm had settled over me. I had a plan. I had truth on my side. And I had something they could never take from me again: my voice. No more silence, no more pretending. I was no longer the victim in this story. The days blurred together in a rhythm of legal meetings, document prep, and restless nights. Caleb and I combed through every paper, every timeline. We built the foundation brick by brick. Every time I heard Tyler's voice in my head, "This house should be ours," I felt my resolve harden further. He wasn't the boy I raised anymore. The man I faced now was calculating, cold, and driven by something I couldn't quite recognize. Maybe it was fear, maybe greed, but it wasn't love. And what hurt more than anything was realizing how quickly he was willing to discard me, his mother, the woman who had poured her life into raising him, who had sacrificed everything to make sure he had a future. Now, I was just standing in the way. Madison, I was sure, had played her part. Her voice hovered behind every threat, every email, every legal tactic. I could hear her even now, coaching him, pushing him. And then came the second call. I saw Tyler's name flash again. I didn't hesitate this time. I answered, and his voice came through like smoke, calm but seething underneath. "Mom, we need to talk." I said nothing. "I've spoken to a lawyer. If you don't reverse the will, this is going to get ugly. You won't win." And just like that, I could hear her voice too. Not directly, but woven through his words. Madison's tone, Madison's strategy. It wasn't just about the house anymore. He wasn't protecting a home. He was protecting her interests. And how that made my stomach turn. "I told you before, Tyler," I said, my voice steadier than my heart. "I'm not changing my mind. You think you can scare me into giving you what you want? That won't work anymore. I see you now. I see what you've become." There was silence on the other end. Then a sharp breath. "Mom, I don't want to do this," he said, his voice tight, low, threatening in its own fragile way. "But you're forcing me. This isn't just about the house. It's about what's right. It's what Dad would have wanted." That almost broke me. Almost. "You're right," I replied, my voice trembling with restrained fury. "It isn't just about the house. It's about respect, something you and your wife have forgotten how to show me. And I'm not giving that up without a fight." Tyler's voice cracked as he tried to hold on to his control. "I'm not asking you to give it up, but I'm telling you, you'll lose. In court. I've already talked to my lawyer. I'm not going to let you ruin everything for me and Madison. I won't let you keep the house from us." And just like that, he said it. Not "I love you," not "I'm sorry," just possession, property. That was what I had become, an obstacle between him and what he thought he was owed. I wanted to remind him of the good years, the scraped knees I bandaged, the school plays I cheered for, the nights I stayed up with him through tears and nightmares. But I knew it would fall on deaf ears. The boy I had raised was gone. "I've made my decision, Tyler," I said. "I'm thick, aching, but resolved. I'm not changing it. So do what you think you need to do. I'll be ready." And I hung up before he could answer. The silence in Cliffside Cottage after that call was unbearable. For the first time in months, I let myself feel the full weight of it. Not just the betrayal, but the grief. The grief of losing someone who was still alive. The grief of realizing your child has turned into someone you no longer recognize. The little boy who once held my hand and told me he'd never leave me had become a man who would drag me through court over a deed. A man willing to shatter our family for something that could be sold with a signature. He wasn't protecting a legacy. He was chasing entitlement. I sat there for a long time, staring into the fireplace, letting the ache move through me like a storm. My heart felt torn in two, one part furious, the other just hollow. But I refused to cry. Not for him. Not anymore. I was done being trampled. Over the next few days, I poured every ounce of strength into preparation. Caleb and I met regularly. We reviewed every clause, every document, every scrap of correspondence that proved this house was mine, legally, emotionally, spiritually. It wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was about reclaiming the part of me that had been slowly stripped away over the years, the part that loved without condition, that gave without keeping score, that hoped even when it hurt. But now I understood. This wasn't about love anymore. This was about war. And I was scared. Oh, I didn't want to be, but I was. Deep down, I feared what this would destroy. What pieces of me would break permanently if I saw my son sitting across a courtroom, treating me like an opponent rather than his mother? Would I lose everything? Could I survive watching the last thread between us unravel completely? As I sat in Caleb's office, listening to him explain the legal process, something shifted in me. I admitted it, quietly, finally. I'm scared. He looked up from his notes and met my eyes. I'd be more worried if you weren't, he said gently. But Eleanor, this isn't just about a house. This is about standing up for yourself, and you have every right to do that. That night, I went to bed early, the silence of the house pressing down on me like a heavy quilt. I closed my eyes, but all I could see was Tyler's face, tight with anger, twisted with resentment. His words echoed like a drumbeat. I'll win, Mom. You'll lose. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. It would change everything. The next morning, I rose before the sun. A storm brewed off the bay, the wind howling through the trees outside. But I felt calm, grounded. I wasn't going to let fear rule me. Not anymore. This fight wasn't just about bricks and beams. It was about my right to exist on my own terms, to live without being erased by people who claim to love me. I would fight for my name, for my story, for the woman I had always been. But I also knew I had no idea just how far Tyler would go to make sure I lost. The tension grew thicker with every passing day. The air inside my home felt heavier, like it was bracing itself for impact. I stayed focused on the legal steps, but part of me couldn't stop grieving the fragile bond I once had with Tyler. I had raised that boy, held him when he cried, fought for him when no one else would. And now, he was threatening me for a house. A house that didn't mean love to him. It meant power, control, victory. It was soul-crushing. Then, a week later, the phone rang again. This time, I knew the voice before I even answered. Douglas, the lawyer who had betrayed me once. Eleanor, he said, voice shaking, I just want to say I'm sorry for everything. I froze. I should have listened to you, he continued. I should have questioned Tyler and Madison, but I didn't. And now it's too late. My hands clenched around the phone. The fury rose again, familiar and hot. But I forced my voice to stay calm. What do you want, Douglas? I asked, my voice thin, brittle with the weight of everything I'd endured. I've already made my decision. I don't need any more apologies. I know, he said quietly, shame dripping from every syllable. But I need to tell you something. It's about Tyler. I held my breath. He's been coming to me, Douglas continued, his voice low and breaking, offering me money to alter the will, to make it look like your revisions were all just a misunderstanding. He's been pressuring me, Eleanor, and I gave in, at first. I closed my eyes as the words pierced through me. I had suspected it. His sudden shift, the unease in his tone, the evasiveness. But hearing it confirmed, it shattered something. "I'm not the man I thought I was," he added, almost like a confession to himself. "And I'm sorry. I can't live with it anymore." So that was it. He wasn't the lawyer I'd trusted for decades. He had become just another pawn in Tyler's campaign, another willing player in Madison's game. My voice was barely a whisper. "So what now, Douglas? What do you want me to do?" He hesitated. "I want to help you. I've already started making things right. I'm going to testify. I'll tell the truth. I'll make sure Tyler doesn't get away with this." I didn't know whether to scream at him or collapse in exhaustion. The betrayal was still raw. But somewhere beneath the storm of hurt, a tiny ember of hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, I had one more ally in this fight. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I said softly, "but I'll take your help, because right now, it's the only chance I've got." "I understand," Douglas replied. "I'll be there. I promise. I'll do everything I can to fix this." When the call ended, I sat in silence, staring out at the endless gray sea as it slammed against the rocky shore below. The pain was still there, sharp and deep, but now, layered over it, was something harder, something that wouldn't bend. Determination. Tyler thought he could break me, that he could manipulate me into surrender, but he had no idea how strong I could be when cornered. The days turned to weeks as the court date loomed like a storm cloud. Caleb and I met constantly, poring over every document, every conversation, every shred of evidence. He was meticulous, tireless, focused, and through all the prep, I could feel the gravity of it all building in my chest like pressure in a sealed jar. Tyler's threats still echoed in my mind. "You'll lose, Mom." He wanted everything, my home, my autonomy, my voice, but he wouldn't get them. I'd already lost so much in life, but I refused to lose this fight. Not after everything. Not after who I had become in this process. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake for hours, thoughts spiraling like a carousel that wouldn't stop turning. I saw Tyler's cold stare, Madison's smug smirk. I heard their dismissive words. I felt every bruise they'd left on my heart. But I didn't cry. Instead, I walked down to the sunroom and stared out at the moonlit ocean. The wind howled around the house, shaking the windows. But inside, I found stillness. Peace. This place, Cliffside Cottage, wasn't just mine by law. It was mine by soul. It was where I had held Martin's hand through sickness, where I had danced barefoot in the kitchen on lazy Sundays, where laughter had once echoed through the hallways when Tyler was still a boy. This house was me, and no one was going to take me away from myself. The morning arrived cold and overcast, as if the sky knew what was coming. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My eyes were tired but steady. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the collar of my coat. This wasn't just about legal documents. This was about dignity, about showing the world and my son that I would not be erased. I grabbed my purse and walked out the door, pausing at the threshold to take one last look at my home. I didn't know what the outcome would be, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't giving up. The drive to the courthouse felt endless. Every twist in the road, every passing tree reminded me of what was at stake. I thought of Tyler, of Madison, of the years I had spent pouring every ounce of myself into their comfort and happiness, only to be treated like a burden, like dead weight. I had given my son everything, and now he wanted to take the one thing I had left. But he'd find me waiting, ready, unshaken. It hurt more than I could ever put into words, but I had no time for grief, not now. This was war, and I was determined to win. When I arrived at the courthouse, Caleb was already waiting for me outside. His suit was sharp, but his expression was sharper, serious, focused. Just seeing him standing there gave me a flicker of calm, though the tension in his eyes mirrored the storm brewing in my chest. We exchanged a few quiet words. No small talk, no comfort, just readiness. This wasn't going to be easy, but we were prepared. The courtroom was already filling when we entered. Tyler and Madison were seated across the aisle, her nails dug into his arm, her face frozen in a confident smirk. Tyler sat stiffly, his expression unreadable, but I could see the tightness in his jaw, the way his eyes flicked nervously toward me, then away. They looked like people who had rehearsed for this moment. But what they didn't realize was that I had lived for this moment. I had earned this moment, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. When the judge entered and the hearing was called to order, I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. Caleb stood beside me, calm and articulate, as he laid out the facts. He moved through the timeline like a conductor guiding an orchestra. He detailed how Tyler had orchestrated attempts to manipulate the will, how Douglas, my former lawyer, had been coerced into altering the documents behind my back. And then, Douglas took the stand. Hearing him admit the truth aloud, that he had caved under Tyler's pressure, that he had broken my trust, made the whole courtroom shift. The weight of it sank in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was premeditated deceit. My throat tightened. My hands trembled in my lap. But I didn't look away. And then, it was my turn. I stood slowly, studying myself, my legs uncertain beneath me, but my heart resolute. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. I met the judge's gaze, then turned toward my son and the woman beside him who had helped destroy so much. I didn't expect this, I began, my voice clear, unwavering. I didn't expect my own son to try to take something that doesn't belong to him, something I spent my whole life building. But more than that, I didn't expect him to throw me away, to see me as nothing more than a nuisance. Tyler's eyes darted toward mine. Madison didn't flinch. She simply crossed her arms tighter, lips pursed like she'd already decided none of this mattered. I raised him, I continued, my voice rising, fueled by years of sacrifice and heartbreak. I gave him everything, and now I'm just something to discard, a problem to solve. I paused, letting the words sink in. This house, this home, isn't just a structure of wood and stone. It's a legacy. It's the dream my husband and I built together, one memory at a time. I won't let it be taken from me, not like this. Silence fell heavy across the room. For a moment, the only sound was the rustle of someone shifting in the gallery. I sat down slowly, my heart pounding, but my shoulders lighter. I had spoken my truth. Caleb placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, his expression proud. He knew. That was the moment I claimed back my power. Tyler and Madison looked rattled. They exchanged a quick glance, their confidence clearly cracked. I had seen behind their masks, and I wasn't afraid anymore. The judge leaned forward, hands folded, and spoke with firm gravity. "I will take all of this under consideration," he said. "You will be notified of my decision in the coming weeks. Until then, no further action is to be taken regarding the estate." His gavel struck once, final and echoing. It wasn't over, but I had stood my ground. I had made them see me, not as the old woman in their way, but as a mother wronged, as a fighter, as someone who refused to be erased. As we stepped outside the courtroom into the brisk afternoon air, Caleb turned to me. "You did well, Eleanor. We've got a good chance." I nodded, but my breath felt caught in my throat. I had been holding it the entire time. It still wasn't finished. But I had done something even more important than defend a house. I had defended myself. The days that followed were unbearable. Time slowed to a crawl, stretched by anticipation and silence. Every phone ring sent my heart lurching, hoping it would be the court, dreading what they might say. Tyler and Madison had gone quiet. No messages, No smug remarks. But I could feel them plotting behind closed doors. Let them. Because for the first time in a long, long time, they had reason to be afraid. I knew they were scheming. Behind closed doors, Tyler and Madison were likely pacing, whispering, plotting. I could almost feel the heat of their frustration burning from miles away. But I didn't care. Not anymore. They had underestimated me. They had pushed me too far. And now, they would face the consequences of mistaking my silence for weakness. I spent the next few days bracing for anything. If the worst happened, if somehow they clawed back control, I was ready. I had already made a promise to myself. No matter the outcome of the trial, I would never again let them shape the way I lived. I had been a good mother, but now it was time to be a good woman to myself. The phone rang on a cloudy Thursday afternoon. "Miss Eleanor," said the calm voice on the other end, "this is Judge Brenner's office. The judge has reached a decision regarding your case. He's requested your presence in court for the final ruling." My heart sank like a stone. This was it. I didn't know if I was ready, but I knew I had no choice. The time had come. The drive to the courthouse was short, but my mind spiraled the entire way. I thought of Tyler, not the man at war with me now, but the little boy who once clutched my hand crossing the street. I thought of how I had taught him to tie his shoes, how I had soothed his childhood fears. And now, I was standing on the edge of losing it all. To him. But I wasn't going to lose. Not after all the wounds, all the betrayal, all the nights I stayed strong when I wanted to crumble. When I arrived, Caleb was waiting on the courthouse steps. His usual confident calm was still there, but I noticed a tightness in his smile. Neither of us spoke more than a few words as we entered the courtroom. It felt different that day, colder somehow, quieter. There was a stillness in the air, like the calm before a thunderstorm. Tyler and Madison sat across the aisle, their expressions stiff and unreadable. They looked like porcelain dolls, perfect but soulless, all pretense and no humanity. I took my seat. My heart was racing. Caleb placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. Then the doors opened. Judge Brenner entered, his black robe flowing, his face solemn. He took his place and looked around the room slowly. When his gaze met mine, it held for a moment, long enough for me to feel seen. Then he began. "I have reviewed the evidence presented by both parties," he said, voice firm and measured. "And I have taken into account all testimonies, including that of the plaintiff's former legal counsel." I held my breath. It is clear that the actions taken by Mr. Tyler Shaw and his legal representative were coercive and ethically inappropriate. A tremor ran through my spine, but Judge Brenner wasn't done. "That said," he continued, "Ms. Eleanor Shaw has the absolute right to determine the distribution of her estate during her lifetime. The amended will is valid. The property in question will remain under her full ownership, and it will not be contested further." I exhaled sharply, unaware until then that I had been holding my breath. The gavel struck. It was done. They had lost. And I had won. But the strange thing was, it didn't feel like triumph. Not entirely. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't the same woman who had once begged for my son's time, who had tried to justify every dismissive glance or missed phone call. That woman had been slowly dying for years. But now she was gone. And in her place stood someone stronger, someone whole. Across the room, Tyler's face twisted with disbelief, lips parted like he had something to say but couldn't find the words. Madison's eyes shot venom toward me, sharp and burning, but she said nothing either. Their silence told me everything. They knew. It was over. Caleb leaned toward me and whispered, "We won, Eleanor." But I still couldn't speak. I just nodded, blinking back tears, not of sadness, but of relief. As we exited the courtroom, Tyler and Madison stormed past, their shoulders stiff with fury. They didn't even glance in my direction, and I didn't offer one either. They had tried to take everything, but now I had something more valuable than a deed: certainty. They couldn't take anything from me again. When I returned home to Cliffside Cottage, everything felt different. The air was crisp, the sea breeze gentler. For the first time in months, I could walk through my home without feeling invaded. I stood in the doorway of the living room, taking it all in. The victory wasn't about the house. It was about reclaiming my life, my name, my dignity. The phone rang again. I picked it up, calm and without hesitation. "Eleanor?" Caleb's voice was warm. I just wanted to say, "You did it." I closed my eyes and smiled softly. "Thank you," I said, "for believing in me." "No," he replied. "Thank you for fighting." As we ended the call, I placed the receiver down and walked to the window, watching the waves crash softly in the distance. For the first time in a long time, I felt still. I felt whole. I hadn't just survived. I had returned. "I just wanted to say, you were incredible," Caleb said, his voice warm through the phone. "We'll make sure everything is squared up with the documents." I smiled, not out of pride, but something deeper, something quieter. "Thank you, Caleb. You've been more than just a lawyer. You were my ally when I needed one most." We ended the call, and I leaned back in my chair, the full weight of the last few months finally sinking into my bones. The fight was over. And for the first time in what felt like years, I felt something I hadn't in so long: peace. It's strange how life just continues. Even after the moment that should have changed everything. The courtroom battle was behind me. The house was mine again. But there I was, still waking up, still brushing my teeth, still making tea like any other day. I had fought for my dignity, my voice, my right to be seen. And now, in the stillness of victory, I found myself wondering, what now? The house felt different without the tension, but it also felt empty. The phone was silent. No calls, no angry voicemails, no sharp-edged texts from Tyler or Madison. I should have been relieved, but all I felt was the echo of absence. What good was winning if it meant losing the one person you fought for in the first place? I began staring out the window more, watching the ocean, my once constant source of peace, roll in like it always had. But now, the waves didn't call me. They whispered reminders of everything I'd lost. I had stood my ground. I had taken back what was mine. But in doing so, I had lost my son. And that pain cut deeper than anything else. One evening, with the silence pressing down like fog, I reached for the phone. I hadn't called anyone in weeks, but my fingers knew who to dial. "Eleanor?" Helen's voice crackled through, warm and familiar, like a sweater you hadn't worn in years, but never stopped loving. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. I paused. "It's over," I said quietly. "They lost. The house is mine." There was silence for a moment on the other end, and then her voice returned, strong and full of emotion. "I'm proud of you. You fought for your life, Eleanor, for your dignity. You should be proud." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I know, but what good is all of it if I'm still here, alone?" She was quiet again, then said, "You're not alone. You have your friends, and more importantly, you have your life. It's not about the inheritance, or even the house. It's about what you do with the time you have left." Her words hit harder than I expected. I had spent so long surviving. I'd forgotten how to live. "You're right," I whispered, the ache in my chest lifting just slightly. "I think it's time to let go." "You've already won, Eleanor," Margaret said, her voice soft but steady. "Now it's time to live. Not for Tyler, not for the past, for you. Walk the beach, write again, paint, plant a garden, breathe." That night, her words echoed in my mind, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed them to take root. The next morning, I woke before the sun had fully risen. Pale gold spilled across the sky, and the sea glistened like it had been waiting for me. I pulled on my coat, slipped into my walking shoes, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the sand cool beneath my feet. I walked for what felt like hours, letting the wind wrap around me, letting the ocean remind me of everything that was still possible. Every step I took wasn't just movement, it was healing. When I returned home, the house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a beginning, a canvas waiting to be painted again. Yes, I had lost a part of my family, but I hadn't lost myself. And that, in the end, was the most important victory of all. I didn't know what the future would hold. Maybe one day Tyler would come back into my life. Maybe he wouldn't. But either way, I would be okay. Because now, this house, Cliffside Cottage, wasn't just mine legally. It was mine spiritually. It was a space where I could finally rebuild, not just my home, but me. And as I sat on the porch, tea in hand, listening to the waves roll in, I smiled softly to myself. The storm was gone, and I had survived it. The waves no longer echoed my pain. They whispered something different now, something softer. A reminder, life could go on. I could go on. And when I stepped back into Cliffside Cottage, a quiet shift occurred deep inside me. I felt lighter, not healed, not whole, but ready to rebuild, ready to redefine what family meant on my terms. That evening, I curled up by the fireplace, the familiar crackle of flame filling the silence. It didn't feel so oppressive anymore. It felt earned. I stared into the flickering amber glow and let the warmth soak into my bones. No one would ever again tell me what my life should be, because I had already survived the hardest part. The phone rang. For the briefest second, I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Mom?" came the voice. Tyler. His tone was quiet, almost strained. I could feel the tremble behind the words. I want to talk." My heart clenched. I closed my eyes and took a breath. "I'm listening," I said. He hesitated, then, more softly than I'd ever heard from him in years, "I'm sorry. For everything. For how I treated you. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I regret it. I really do. I don't know how we got here, but I want to fix things, if you'll let me." I stood frozen in my kitchen, phone pressed against my ear. This was the moment I dreamed about. And yet, now that it was real, I didn't know what to say. "I don't know if we can go back, Tyler," I replied gently, "but maybe we can start with a conversation." He sighed in relief, audible even through the phone. "That's all I'm asking, Mom. Just one conversation." After we hung up, I stood there for a while. The house was mine, but I realized there was more to rebuild than walls and windows. There was us, if it could even be rebuilt. But for the first time in years, I was willing to try. The days that followed were uneasy, full of hesitation and something else too, something tender, flickering like the first light after a long storm, hope. I thought about all that had happened, the betrayal, the silence, the court, the years that had chipped away at our bond. But I also remembered the little boy with skinned knees and too big sneakers, the laughter that once filled our home, the way he used to reach for me without hesitation. I didn't know if I could forgive him, but I knew I wasn't ready to close the door either. That Saturday, Tyler called again. This time, there was a different energy in his voice, nervous urgency. "Can we meet?" he asked. "I think it's time." I agreed. We chose a quiet seaside cafe in town. I arrived early, taking a seat by the window. It was one of those mornings where the world felt crisp and filled with possibility. But inside me, 100 emotions churned. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I was hoping for. I just knew I had to be there. And then I saw him. Tyler looked almost the same. Tall, neatly dressed, that same tired smile. But something in his eyes was different. He carried a weight now, a sorrow that hadn't been there before. "Hey, Mom," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Hey," I replied. My smile was soft, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. "You look good," he offered. I nodded. He hesitated, then said, "I know this isn't easy, but I've been thinking about everything, and I'm sorry. I can't undo it, but I want to try to make it right." A lump formed in my throat, but I forced it down. I wasn't here to cry. I was here to listen. "I don't know if you can make it right," I said. "I don't know if I can forget it, but I appreciate you showing up." He nodded, his gaze unwavering, and for the first time in years, I saw something I thought I'd lost forever. I saw my son. Not the man who had betrayed me, not the voice shouting down a phone line, but the boy I had raised, the one who used to fall asleep in my arms. We didn't talk about the house. We didn't talk about court. We talked about life, about memories, about small things that didn't feel so small anymore. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. "I don't know if we can just pick up where we left off," I said gently. "I don't expect that," Tyler replied, his voice quiet, raw. "But I don't want to lose you. I don't want us to be strangers." He looked away for a second, then back at me, his gaze clearer than I'd seen in years. "I was blinded, Mom. Blinded by Madison, by the house, by everything I thought I needed. And in chasing all of that, I lost sight of the one thing that actually mattered." His words hit something deep inside me. I'd heard plenty of excuses over the years, but this wasn't that. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't defending. He was owning it. And that mattered. "I've been angry for so long," I admitted, my voice shaky. "Angry at you, at Madison, at myself. I still don't know if I can forgive you, Tyler, but I'm willing to try, for both of us." His eyes softened. He reached across the table and gently laid his hand on mine. "I don't know if I deserve your forgiveness," he said, emotion tugging at his voice. "But I'm here. I'll stay here. We don't have to fix everything in one conversation. I just want to try. I want to earn back your trust." I wasn't prepared for that sincerity. Not from him. But it was there. And for the first time in a long, long time, I saw the boy I had raised. Not the man who tried to take what wasn't his. Not the stranger who'd stood beside his wife in silence. I saw the son who used to run into my arms, barefoot and beaming. We spent the next hour just talking. Not about the will, not about the house or courtrooms or betrayal. We talked about life, about memories, about things that used to matter before everything got so tangled. We laughed once or twice and cried quietly when neither of us could stop it. A fragile bridge was being built, tentative, trembling, but there. As we stood up to leave, Tyler pulled me into a hug. It was firm, honest, trembling with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I love you." Simple words, but they landed with the weight of 1,000 regrets. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I wasn't ready to let go of the past entirely, but maybe, just maybe, I was ready to move forward, to find out where this new version of our relationship might lead. When I stepped out of the cafe, the world felt lighter. I still had no idea what the future held, but there was a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The weeks that followed moved slowly, cautiously, like we were both afraid of stepping too hard and breaking the bridge we'd started to build. It wasn't a quick fix. There was no magic word, no sudden erasing of pain. But something from that conversation had stayed with me, something real, something raw. It made me believe that maybe, just maybe, we could build something new if we were both willing to try. I spent quiet evenings thinking about it all, the anger, the betrayal, but also the love, the bond we'd once shared before it all unraveled. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about pretending the past never happened. It was about choosing not to carry its weight into the future. I wasn't sure I could forgive him yet, but I could open the door. Just a crack. A few days later, the phone rang again. "Hey, Mom," Tyler said, his tone unsure but sincere. "I know it's only been a few days, but how are you?" It was such a simple question, but it felt like a gift. "I'm okay," I said, my voice warm. "How about you?" "I'm trying," he replied, almost apologetically. "I've made a mess of things, and I know I don't deserve a quick fix, but I don't want you to think I'll just disappear again." A soft knot in my chest began to loosen. "I don't want that either," I said, honestly. "I don't know where this leads, Tyler, but I'm willing to take it one day at a time. Are you?" There was a pause. Then his voice came through, thick with emotion. "Yeah, I am. I just want to make it right." We talked a little longer. Nothing too deep, nothing too heavy. But that's what we needed, small steps. The quiet rebuilding of something that had once been beautiful. When the call ended, there was a promise between us. We'd talk again soon. As the days passed, I found myself looking forward to his calls. They weren't always emotional, sometimes just about the weather or what we'd had for lunch, but each one was a thread, slowly mending what had been torn. It wasn't easy. Not every day was hopeful. There were moments the old hurt bubbled back up. Moments I wanted to scream, "Do you really get what you did to me?" But each time he called, each time he reached out without being prompted, a little more of the resentment melted. It wasn't over. But maybe, just maybe, it didn't have to be. But each call, each message brought us a little closer to something that resembled normal again. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Then, one quiet afternoon, Tyler Shaw showed up at my doorstep. He was holding a small bouquet of flowers, nothing extravagant, just a modest bunch of daisies and lavender, but it was enough to melt something that had long been frozen inside me. "I know I can't make up for everything," he said as I opened the door, "but I wanted to do something to show you I'm trying. I can't take back what I did, but I can start here." I looked at the flowers, then up at him, and for the first time in a long while, I saw my son. Not the man who had been blinded by greed and pride, not the stranger who had once left me behind, but the boy I had raised, the man who was finally starting to show up for me again. "I'm not asking you to forget, Mom," he added gently. I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm going to keep trying." A lump caught in my throat as I took the flowers from his hands. I hadn't expected this, not yet. But maybe this wasn't about forgetting the past. Maybe it was about acknowledging it, facing it, and choosing to move forward, together, one step at a time. "I'm not ready to forgive everything, Tyler Shaw," I said softly, voice thick with emotion. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to let you show me." He smiled. A small, sincere smile that reminded me of the child he once was. "That's all I'm asking for, Mom. A chance." We stood there for a moment in the doorway, neither of us sure what would happen next. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't afraid. Maybe that was the first true step toward healing. Not perfection, but willingness. Not knowing the road, but walking it anyway. A few weeks later, Tyler Shaw invited me to dinner. Just the two of us. No Madison, no drama, no expectations. Just mother and son, meeting in the fragile space between what was and what might still be. It wasn't some grand gesture or overly rehearsed apology. It was just dinner, a quiet meal, a conversation. And in that simplicity, something began to settle. As I sat across from him, listening to him talk about his work, his daily life, his struggles, I realized something. We were both different, and that was okay. We didn't need to go back. We just needed to go forward, honestly and gently. It wouldn't be the same. It couldn't be. But we could build something new, something more honest, more balanced, more earned. By the end of that meal, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not perfect peace, but real peace. and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had my son back. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, I knew that. There would be stumbles, hard days, and old wounds that reopened without warning. But after all the anger, all the silence, all the grief, just taking the next step felt like a miracle. Over the next few months, we found a rhythm, a slow, steady rebuilding, not just a house or a legal victory, but a relationship, a family. Tyler Shaw began to call more often, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to ask for advice, sometimes just to say hello. It wasn't always easy. Some days, the past came back sharp and loud, but more often, there was laughter, honest questions, care. We learned how to speak in the quiet. We learned that healing doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from choosing to stay, even when it hurts. Little by little, we began to find our way back to each other. One day, a few months after our first honest conversation, Tyler Shaw came by unannounced. I was in the kitchen, hands deep in dough for a pie, when I heard his voice from the living room. "Mom, you got a minute?" I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped out, surprised to see him standing there, looking almost boyish again, nervous, unsure, holding a small box. "What's this?" I asked, a little wary, a little curious. Gifts weren't something I'd expected. Not from him, not after everything we'd been through. "I just wanted to give you something," he said, holding the box out. "Something to show you I mean it this time, that I'm not giving up on us." I took the box gently, feeling the quiet weight of it in my palms. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, a small heart-shaped pendant nestled in velvet. Simple, beautiful, and somehow it broke me more than all the shouting, all the apologies. "I saw it," Tyler Shaw continued, his voice low, "and I thought of you, of everything. You've always had my heart, Mom, even when I didn't deserve to be near yours. I know this doesn't fix everything, but I hope it's a start." My eyes blurred with tears. It wasn't the necklace. It was what it stood for. His effort, his humility, his willingness to show up. Not just for me, but for himself, for the man he still had the chance to be. I reached out and pulled him into a hug, a real one, the kind we hadn't shared in years. "Thank you, Tyler Shaw," I whispered. "I don't know if I can ever forget what happened, but I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of us." That moment didn't erase the past, but it softened it. And from there, slowly, tenderly, we continued to rebuild. Not the version of our relationship that had crumbled, but something new, something more honest, something stronger. As for me, I learned something unexpected in the process. I had spent so long fighting for the house, for fairness, for acknowledgement, but in the end, what I really needed was space. To breathe, to heal, to dream again. The house, once heavy with history and pain, became a sanctuary again. The mornings were for walks on the beach, the afternoons for tea, reading, laughter. I reconnected with old friends, took up knitting, learned to bake bread. I even painted the living room a soft yellow, the same shade my husband once said reminded him of sunshine after a storm. And bit by bit, I stopped measuring my days by what I had lost. One evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sky melt into the sea. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting everything gold and gentle. And I realized this life, this quiet, beautiful, imperfect life, was mine to shape, mine to love. I wasn't defined by betrayal, or bitterness, or even motherhood. I was defined by what I chose to do next, and I chose peace. No, this story didn't end with a fairy tale. There were no fireworks, no picture-perfect reconciliation, but there was something better. There was freedom, a chance to live with an open heart, to let go of what I couldn't change, and to build the kind of life I had always deserved. One moment, one sunrise, one step at a time. As the waves whispered against the shore below, I smiled. It was over, and for the first time in years, I could finally breathe. This story is more than a mother's courtroom battle. It's a testament to what happens when silence is mistaken for weakness and love is met with betrayal. Eleanor Shaw's journey reminds us that dignity doesn't come from what we give, but from what we're no longer willing to lose. She fought not just for a house, but for her voice, her legacy, and her right to matter. And while she may have lost the family she once knew, she found something far more powerful: herself. If this story moved you, if you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or pushed aside by the very people you gave your all to, then please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join this growing community of people who believe in standing tall after being knocked down. Your support helps these stories reach others who need to hear them. And before you go, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and it means the world to know you're listening. Let's continue building a space where truth, healing, and resilience are celebrated.